What is up, everybody? It is Alex from Heavy New York, calling from the quarantine zone again. And this time we got Mercedes of Kittie and, of course, the new project, the White Swan. Thank you so much for your time today. I really appreciate it.
You're welcome. I'm happy to be here.
Yep, it's awesome to have you here. I really love this new Nocturnal Transmission EP. I really want to know, like, first and foremost, like, what the thought process was making this EP. Was it like a preconceived idea? How did sort of like Nocturnal Transmission sort of come to be?
I feel like with this particular EP, it's just an extension of every EP before that with the White Swan. And I find that, you know, as we progress and we continue to put out material and record material, things just, you know, evolve kind of naturally and change and get a little more weird and a little more polished, and which is kind of weird to say when we have so much distortion on our guitars.
Yep.
Yeah, so super cool.
Yeah, I've always said, like, distortion is like the ultimate, like, is like the best. Distortion is to music is like what a filter is to an Instagram photo. It like makes it so much stronger and really enhances the sound and adds a lot more to it.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely, I feel like with this band, it's part of our identity, you know, that heaviness, but at the same time, some very different stuff as well. So,
could this EP maybe serve as like a clear representation of the direction that the White Swan is going into? Maybe like a preview or a trailer in a way, or are you going to even go more experimental?
I think that's the way that things are kind of starting to progress. You know, as you know, listening even from our last EP, Touch Is Destroyed, to Nocturnal Transmission, it's just gotten a little weirder, you know?
Yeah.
And I plan on, you know, continuing to be that weird guy. That writes weird music. So, but you never know what'll happen. We're still, you know, toying with writing the next installment, so we'll see where that goes.
Do you like started off with like a preconceived idea, like how you want it to sound, like the direction that it goes, or do things kind of like happen organically and kind of like fall into place?
So yeah, I've never written a song and been like, I want it to sound like that. It just kind of happens that way, if that makes sense. And the music always happens like way before any of the vocal melodies or anything. And usually I live with that for quite a bit of time before anything else, right?
Yeah.
So yeah, it's with the exception of a couple songs, usually like I sit on things for quite a bit of time and really plot out how the vocals and the lyrics and the melodies are going to be, if that makes sense. So things just kind of progress naturally, which is nice with the way that I write songs.
Is there ever a time where maybe like a concept or a subject matter could help maybe influence the direction of the music?
Oh, always. I feel like, you know, there's always an underlying theme, especially with our music, of happiness, which is weird, right? Because you would never think that. That's
so not metal.
Yeah, I know, right? It's this new thing that kids are doing, and no, I'm kidding. Yeah, it's super different. Like, because I'm just like the really super happy person, and I just and I write from experience and how I feel, and I feel like I definitely express myself a little differently when it comes to, you know, traditional metal music and traditional heavy music in general. So, and I like being different, and I think that it's a direct reflection of who I am as a person, which is kind of cool. So there's that. But also, I mean, I also like the fact that it's just it's so polarizing, if that makes sense. Like, you know, to have happy music be super heavy is that's not really something that's a normal thing, right?
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I guess it depends because Van Halen, rest in peace. Like his music was super happy, and at the time that was first released, people were looking at that like it was black metal. So,
well, you're right about that. But I mean, how could you not know that David Lee Roth was happy by listening to him? Like he's just like on 10 all the time.
Yeah. When you look at like all of these EPs for the White Swan, when you look at like The White and Anubis and Touch, Taste, Destroy, like is it almost do you clearly look at these EPs as like self-portraits or representations of who you were in 2016, 2017, 2018 and now, right?
Mm-hmm. Oh, for sure. I just feel like they're like a snapshot in time, if that makes sense.
Yeah.
And you can like listening to them consecutively, you can really hear the progression, and you can really hear the difference in and I feel like you probably would be able to hear where everything's going too, which is kind of cool.
Are these EPs almost kind of like Lord of the Rings? Like you recommend a listener listens to the first one before moving on to Nocturnal Transmission and so on?
Well, I feel like they can be enjoyed separately, but if you'd like to enjoy them all together, you can. But the nice thing about that is that because we release EPs and we do it so frequently, that it would be listening to them in succession would be like listening to a full album. So,
yeah.
If you want that full album feel, listen to everything at once.
It's funny too because you mentioned like you capture like a stamp in time, which is really cool. I love it when a song like captures a moment. But do you find that sometimes you're working on a song or an album for days, weeks? If you're Tool, 13 years. So like, do you find it maybe like the longer you're working on something, the harder it is to kind of like maintain that emotional spark or capture that moment?
That is the story of my life. I feel like some of the best songs that White Swan has are like, so I have this kind of like weird ritual type thing that happens, and it's not necessarily something that I plan, but there's always one song where I'm like, week before we go into the studio to record, I'm like, we're changing this song. It's completely different now. This is how it goes. And that happened with Nocturnal Transmission with Purple. So I just decided, I was like, I'm completely changing this song. I don't like the way it sounds. Like a couple days before we recorded, I just sent a video of me playing the song. I sent it to Kieran Shane, and I was like, okay, so this is how the song's going to go now. And then we recorded it.
You ever worried like the original way you wrote it is going to be like a B-side one day, just be the biggest hit you've ever had?
Oh my God. You know what? I don't know. I kind of felt like it was lacking, but I mean, that I can't control that at all. I mean, that would be really super cool. but it would be cool that anybody liked any of my stuff at this point. But yeah, that would be hilarious. But that always happens for some reason. Like right before we go to record, I'm like, oh my God, I hate this song. I have to fix it. And then I end up changing it.
Yeah, it's funny too. Like when you present something, like if you have a song that you think somebody's gonna love, but then like the second you present it to them, you kind of like backtrack and be like, oh, maybe I shouldn't have showed them that. It like you never know how something is until like you bring it to a different moment.
Yeah, exactly. Right. So I feel like I've chosen wisely thus far. So
definitely have. Especially with Purple, because that's actually my favorite song on the EP. So,
oh, good. That makes me happy.
And like, I feel like there's many different vibes too. I mean, just with this EP alone, going from In Love and Ritual to the title track of Nocturnal Transmission, like it just seems like there was many different vibes, and like you express many different emotions. You mentioned like it's happy music, but I get many different vibes from it altogether. I feel like that the White Swan's music, I feel like is music for the greatest time, for the best of times and the worst of times.
I'm glad you think so. I think, like not every song is super happy or anything like that. Like, I feel like on this particular EP, it's definitely like I feel that definitely when I was writing the lyrics, especially for this EP, it was one of the happiest periods of my life for sure. But I feel like that reflects it. But if you go back and listen to a song like The White, like that's a pissed off song.
Yeah, definitely. And all your years with Kittie too. I mean, you had plenty of pissed off music there too.
Oh boy. Yup.
And what I wanted to know is really my only question pertaining to that is like, is there a usual method behind the madness when it comes to creativity, or are you in a completely separate mind frame with the White Swan as opposed to what you've been doing with Kittie?
I feel like I'm like super used to the way that I do things, so it doesn't really stray very much, other than the fact that I don't have a writing partner with this. Like, whereas with Kittie, it was my writing partner was my sister and Tara as well. Towards the latter part, the last 4 albums or 3, however many albums, it feels like Tara's been in that band with us forever. So I just feel like she's been around forever. She has been. I think she joined the band in like 2007, so 6.
Yeah.
So that's a long time. But anyway, yeah. So for like the last 3 records that we had, it was myself, my sister, and Tara. So the only difference really is that I don't have anybody. I don't really have anybody. To bounce things off of, like I bounce things off of Kira and Shane, but usually, by the time I'm finished a song, like it's pretty much done. But Kira and Shane get to do all of their own, work. They get to do their own thing with their own instrument, which is super cool as well. Like, Shane writes all of his own solo stuff. Kira writes all of her bass parts, and it's just it's a little bit different, but not by much.
Mm-hmm. Well, do you think that maybe like with the White Swan, like for lack of better terms, there's a little bit more creative independence because it really is coming straight from you, and there's really no other like, even though you do appreciate input from other members, it almost seems like that this is you get to channel everything you may have not have been able to channel before into this, right?
You are correct. Yes. So that's definitely a thing that happens, and that's definitely a thing that's a real life thing. And I feel like, sometimes that's not necessarily a good thing, because I am my own worst critic, and I'm really hard on myself, like like really hard on myself when it comes to that kind of stuff. So it's probably not the best thing for me, if that makes sense, but it does kind of, it's not great because I don't have anybody to really, I don't have that secondary input, but at the same time, it's really great because this gets to be something that is completely mine, right?
Yeah, definitely. But, being your own master, it's great, but you mentioned you're your own worst critic too. I'd imagine that the pressure, is it a little bit more pressure, if you don't mind me asking?
Oh, no, it's like 100% more pressure. It's terrible. And it's interesting because I put all of that pressure on myself. It's not that I have any external pressure. It's all internal. So, which makes it even worse, right?
Yeah. Well, as a human, you could escape anything in this world except yourself. That's the only thing you cannot escape.
Well, you are correct.
When it comes to getting into that creative mind frame, does inspiration come sometimes like strike out of the blue, or do you kind of need to be in like your own little bubble or your own little atmosphere in order for the creative energy to flow through?
It's interesting because it really depends, right? Like there are times where I will just throw out 3, 4, 5 songs while sitting on my couch, and then there's times and it just happens, and then there's times where I have to sit down and force myself to do it, which is also a thing. And not usually a whole lot of good comes out of that, but sometimes it does. So it just really depends on how I'm feeling, and and sometimes lightning strikes, and I get to create something that sounds marginally okay, and then sometimes I'm just like, oh, this sucks. I suck.
Well, isn't it I'd imagine like one of the worst things is where you feel the creative energy. You want to create something, you're inspired or whatever, but like you just like what's in your heart and what's in your mind doesn't necessarily translate to your hands. So like you feel the urge to create something, but nothing ever comes out.
Yeah, and that's just something that you have to learn to live with, unfortunately, which sucks. Because like there's been many times where I've just been like, oh, I need to write something, and I'll sit down and nothing will happen.
Yeah, it sucks because it feels like as an artist, your art is the one aspect of life you actually have control over. But I've always said that art is life within itself. So like you can create it, but in the end, you're just its humble guide on what it can do from there.
Yeah. I sometimes I feel like there's like terrible forces at work, like preventing me from doing things that I want to do.
It's called government. No, I'm kidding.
Oh, well, there's that. But like creatively and governmentally as well. That's not a word.
But here comes the most difficult question of the whole creative process, though. And I feel like from what we were talking about, you'd be the best person to ask this question to. How do you know when a song is done?
It's never done.
Yeah, I get that all the time.
It's never done. And you know what? If I had unlimited money and unlimited resources, I would still be working on our first EP. Or it would probably be a double album by now. But if that were the case, and it would never get done, it would never be finished, because I am not the kind of person that is satisfied with just, oh, well, that's good for now. Like, I can't do that. And it's really hard to tear myself away from the recording process. But at the same time, like, it's really easy to tear myself away from the recording process because it makes me so uncomfortable. But I have to, make things perfect. And that's just not what writing music should be about. So at least I know when to say enough is enough, which is usually a day, because the White Swan records in a day. We usually take one day and record everything, and then we're done. And I limit our time on purpose, because if I had unlimited amounts of resources and time, then I would still be doing the recording process, and they'll get released, right?
Yeah, and it's funny too, because like I've always said that it's one thing to be able to play an instrument very well. I mean, there's super talented musicians out there, but then writing is also another separate talent, and then the creative process is also something that you kind of need to, like, there are elements of discipline that you need. And that's why one trait that some artists have that I'm almost envious of is the ability to just like put something down and come back to it later. I don't understand how some people can do that.
Yeah, I usually stop when my hand starts to hurt.
Fair enough.
Like that. Yeah, which, I mean, like, I'm a drummer, so like playing guitar is completely foreign to me anyway. So that's when I stop, and when it's like, my wrist hurts. Okay, I gotta stop now.
Yeah. Well, drumming is like such a primal instrument because, like, first of all, I've always said that drums are the most pressuring instrument because the famous saying, if your drummer isn't good, your band is not going to be good. And, like, do you find it easier to come up with drum beats when you have music presented to you, or do you have, or do you kind of have like the whole rhythm section laid down before the music goes over that?
It's usually like when I'm writing like a guitar riff, let's say. So I'm writing a guitar riff. Usually in my head, I'm already thinking about what I'm going to do with drums. But of course, I can't play drums and play guitar at the same time. Unfortunately, which if I could, that would be amazing. But definitely not a thing that works, in this lifetime, sadly. But I have the next best thing, which is a computer, so I can kind of figure things out that way, and put something in place until I can actually, send those riffs to Kieran Shane, and then usually, we get together and we'll kind of jam things out, if that makes sense, and us playing together. So it'll be Kira and Shane on their instruments, and then I'll play drums for that portion of it. Just because happy accidents happen, and it kind of helps to solidify how the song's going to go. And there's always, it's just for me, like playing a song, like on drums, that just helps me to solidify how the song is actually going to go.
Yeah. Drums are always like the duct tape. They fix everything.
Right?
Yep. And the final question I just wanted to ask you is actually, being that you are a musician who originated from Ontario, Canada, I've interviewed a lot of bands from Canada, and it's always been kind of like a topic I love to talk about, because like starting back in the day, was there kind of like a scene in your region of Canada where you started from? Like, because Canada has been home to so many phenomenal bands throughout history. I was just curious if there was maybe like a scene that you cut your teeth in back in the day.
So we were like the odd man out in London, because it was a really super punk rock heavy scene, and we were one of the very few quote unquote metal bands in that scene. So we always ended up playing with punk rock bands, and we usually stuck out pretty badly, but that was not necessarily a bad thing. I always enjoy sticking out like a sore thumb, personally. But yeah, there were a couple live venues here. One of them still exists, and the other one is a hole in the ground right now.
Oh.
So there are a couple live venues that, we ended up playing. One called The Office, and the other called The Embassy. And the Embassy is no longer with us, sadly. But we definitely played a lot of live shows, and then once we started playing out of town and stuff like that, that's kind of where things started to get a little more serious. So we're pretty close to Toronto, and taking the 2-hour drive to Toronto wasn't that big of a deal to go play some shows. And Toronto has an amazing live, and especially back in the late 90s, Toronto had an amazing live music scene. Still does, but it was extra special back then.
Yeah, I've talked to like so many bands from Canada, and they say like, the scene in Quebec is very different from like the scene in Vancouver, very different from the scene like in Toronto, and then very different from like Edmonton. It just seems like, it almost seems like Canada has like, it's like multiple countries in one.
Yeah, well, we're all very spread out from each other, right? So like, if you think about it, like, to drive from one end of the country to the other is like, a crazy amount. It's like more than 2,000 miles. So
wow.
So I think if you were to do like the true one end to the country to the other, it'd be a lot more than 2,000 miles, I think. But we're really spread out, and it makes sense that all of the major cities in each province would have their own little niche thing that would make them different.
Yeah, definitely.
Yeah.
Definitely. So before we go, I want to thank you so much again for your time today. Is there just anything else with the White Swan that you would like to promote? Like if maybe there'll be another EP in the works fairly soon, or any maybe like live stream performances that we could be expecting as well?
Well, hopefully we can put together a live stream sometime in the near future. But right now we haven't done. It's kind of hard with lockdown and everything like that, because things are starting to get a little weird again. So we'll see what happens. But other than that, I think our EP Nocturnal Transmission came out in September, and we have vinyl up on our Bandcamp, and we have digital sales on our Bandcamp as well, and our whole discography's on there. So if you want to go check it out, go check it out. You can find us pretty much in any streaming service. And every once in a while, we throw up some limited edition shirts and stuff like that you can check out as well. So
awesome.
We've got all stuff.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much, Mercedes. Everybody, we are here with Mercedes of the White Swan. Be sure to check out the brand new EP, Nocturnal Transmission. This is Alex from Heavy New York. We will see you next time.